Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my weekly reading wrap-up. So this is going up a little bit late because I just returned from my best friend's wedding pretty late last night, so I definitely didn't record my wrap-up yesterday like I usually do, but that's okay. I did read a book yesterday, but I didn't finish one, which was crazy. It's probably the first day this year that I didn't finish a book. But I definitely was still reading, of course. I just was so tired when I got back home that I only read for a little bit. But that's fine. But before we dive into the 16 books that I read last week, we do have some new channel members that I just want to shout out real quickly. So we do have Karen, who joined at the Faded Friend level. Karen, I only promise to make a few Karen jokes because I'm sure you get them all the time, but so happy to have you. Thank you so much. We have Charlotte, who also joined at the Faded Friend level. Welcome, Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining the community. And then we have Paula, who joined at the Romantic Renegade level. So thank you so much. If you would like to learn more about my channel memberships, there's always a link down in the description box. That just helps support my channel when maybe ad revenue isn't as much as it should be. I make a lot of videos about spicy books. That's mostly what I do. And sometimes the way YouTube will support that isn't what we would hope. So that just keeps me going, supplies my book habits, and that's how it goes. But okay, enough of the self-promotion. Let's get into the books I read. This was a very interesting week. I branched out a little bit with some books, and I was rewarded in some ways and I was horrified in others. So let's get into what I'm talking about here, okay? So the first book that I read was Tie Me Down by Melanie Harlow. This is an arc of her book. This series comes out on, or this last book in the Bellamy Creek series comes out on Tuesday. The 26th is the day that it is, I believe so. This was book 4. This was about Beckett, and I can't remember her first name, but this was an interesting one because it wasn't technically like a second chance romance because they weren't ever together when they were teenagers, but he was like her best friend. They lived across the street from each other, but they went on to live their lives, and she is just getting divorced. She has a 6-year-old son, and her mother, her mother has passed, and she needs to fix up her mother's house and sell it. So Beckett, who still lives across the street from this house, he lives with his dad who has dementia. So be warned about that. They don't officially tell if it's dementia or Alzheimer's because they just don't ever officially say, I don't think. But it has those issues that may be a trigger. Something else in this for me that I wanted to, it wasn't a trigger, but it made me kind of have a sad smile. My grandfather did not die of Alzheimer's or dementia, but my grandfather's name was Eugene. Eugene Marshall was my grandfather's name, and his dad's name is Eugene. And so this didn't make me sad because I was very young when my grandpa died, and I really only have good memories of my grandpa. There was never, he passed very quickly of a heart attack. Sorry to take a sidetrack, but the point being, this was actually really cathartic for me and made me happy because I've never read a book that had a Grandpa Eugene in it, and because that was so that was close to my heart and made me happy actually. However, with this story, I did give this 4 stars, and there's a couple reasons why it wasn't a 5-star. Anyway, so they end up staying at his house with him and his dad. The little boy is wonderful. Oh my gosh, I love her little boy. But the thing with this one is that Beckett has wanted to be with her always. He sabotaged other relationships. He's made himself emotionally available to her when she was going through stuff with her husband. He's someone that she's always kind of cried to when things have been bad or wrong, right? And, then when things start developing between them, because everyone's like, girl, he's been carrying a torch for you forever. All of a sudden when there's she's like, wow, now might be the time to try. He's like, oh, I can't commit to you. And there's supposed to be reasons for that. Mostly one being that his dad loved someone and then like the mother like left when they were young. And he's just like, oh, well, I couldn't commit to you. I wouldn't be good at it. And I mean, dear Melanie Harlow, like, I'm not, you know, you're writing your stories. It's great. That made no sense for the character she had developed. For me personally, when I'm reading this, I'm like, why would he do this? He has wanted this woman for 20 years and she's finally giving him a chance and is like, I'm ready to do something. He's like, oh, but I don't commit. That made no sense. It really didn't. And it threw a wrench in it around the 70% mark where they're having the darkest moment. And I'm just like, this feels like a very manufactured thing. If there had been more about his dad and like the way he felt about the mom, but the dad doesn't talk about the mom like at all. He's just having, you know, those normal kind of scenes that you see when a parent has dementia or Alzheimer's. There wasn't any like regrets that the dad had or stuff like that. So I don't know. It just felt a little bit off for me. And also, I've read many Melanie Harlow by this point. I've probably read 15 of her books. And she's one of the contemporary authors for me where I always want to read one of her books. I always fall into them very easily. But then I get to a certain point of the book each time where I know every beat that it will have. And I'm about to talk to you about some other authors I read this week that I never know how they're going to tell their story, even when I've read the same amount of books from them. And so when I compare that, I'm just like, I wish that it wouldn't be a formula for you. I wish you would throw in a different curveball instead of so perfectly ticking things out, if that makes sense. Then I read Beneath the Burn by Pam Godwin. And guess what, guys? This was the last Pam Godwin I needed to read. So my Pam Godwin deep dive will be coming soon. Hopefully in time for her new release, which is going to be called Lessons in Sin, which I hope I'm going to get an arc for. And it's going to be a priest romance. But I finished Beneath the Burn, which is a rock star romance. Now, this was definitely a dark romance, and it was a bit more of like a thriller, kind of. So our two characters, we have our hero, who he is a very traumatized man. He is an up-and-coming rock star. He has problems being touched because he has lots of trauma from his past. That's nothing new for a Pam Godwin book. He was actually molested by his aunt, so that's like the trigger with her, and with him. And then we have our heroine, who she was sold to basically he's not a mafia boss, but because he's like literally a businessman, but he gets that kind of vibe. Her father owed him money. Her father lost her in a card game to this guy. And so from the age of 16 to like 18, she belonged to this dude. And he did horrible, twisted, mostly like non-consensual BDSM things. So it's not called BDSM, it's abuse. But I mean, it's specific, the things he's doing to her, because it's specific for later on in the story. I literally spit on my camera because I was so excited. Oh boy. But she escapes when she's young. And then she literally lives on the run. And when we're meeting her in this story, we don't fully know that back part of it, but she's a tattoo artist, and she's a transient tattoo artist. And our hero, who's struggling to be touched, he has these horrible burn scars on his back because of things that his aunt did to him. He decides that he wants to get a tattoo. So they have this meet where they are only with each other for a little bit of time, and she starts doing this tattoo on his back, but they only have a certain amount of time. And so she starts this tattoo, and then they part ways, but he already is like, I'm gonna come back and meet this girl, and I want to date this girl. Like, just in that interaction they have this instant connection. Well, though, it turns out she's already seeing someone, and she tells him that when he asks her out. She's like, I already have a boyfriend. Nothing can happen with us. And he's like, okay. Well, that night, her boyfriend proposes to her for about the 50th time, because she does have a wonderful boyfriend. But that night, Roy comes to get her. One of Roy's assassins, this bad guy, and kills her boyfriend and recaptures her. And so then there's a portion of this book where we see what's happening to her being tortured and abused, because this is Pam Godwin and she doesn't hide stuff from you. And then we see what's happening with our hero who thought he had this chance with this girl. And then eventually when he makes it back to this city, he finds out that she's been killed because there's other stuff going on, and people who are trying to help her have made it look like she died. But he hears that she died, and he just fucks right off a cliff. And so for the next 2 or 3 years, he just lives the rock star life. He just lives the rock star life. And she is on the run with someone who's helping her. So this isn't all stuff that happens in the past. Like, we see these phases happen, and then at a certain point in the book, they run into each other again, and it's like they're being reawakened, but they also have all this baggage and trauma built up, and you're just rooting for them so hard, guys. Like, you're rooting for them. But even me, as a Pam Godwin lover, and I know what she can do, I was like, how is this gonna happen? And it did, and I gave it 5 stars. So there you go. Then I read Roman by Sophie Lark. This was book 3 in the Underground series. This one was this was a hate to love. This was I was your bully 5 years ago. So this girl is actually the younger sister of the one from Snow, which is kind of cool. And she had went to this pretty fancy school, the school that her dad was going into debt to pay for. And Roman was her bully because he was, well, it's the typical reasons, like he was attracted to her and she wasn't. So then she hates him or he hates her because she wasn't interested. That was dumb. But we don't actually spend time in high school. Only the prologue is in high school. Now we're in the present time, and Roman and his sister are trying to open a casino. And she is a reporter who's supposed to report on his casino. And then there's a dueling casino that's like going up at the same time. And he has to be nice to her to make sure she doesn't write a tank piece. And there is lots of hate sex in this book. But in a typical Sophie Lark fashion, I had no idea where this was going to go because Sophie's awesome. I did give this one 4 stars because this is some of her earlier writing. And there were some parts of it where it's written a little too quickly, and she even will say herself that this first series she wrote them as like quicker shots. They're not novella length, they're like 250 to 300 pages, but they definitely read a lot faster than her newer works. A lot faster than some of her books that are this big, but it was still so enjoyable. And again, she does stuff with her characters that I just did not expect, and I loved it so much. Then I read Daddy Issues by Mia Clark. And I wish I didn't finish this book. I gave it 2.5 stars. Do I even want to take the time to explain it because I didn't like it. But there's this girl, she's 18, and her friend, who's also 18, has a brother who is 12 years older than her. Their parents died when he was 18, and he's taking care of his sister since she was 6 years old, which is great. But she just calls him daddy because it was always weird to explain to people that he's her older brother and not her dad and blah, blah, blah. So since she was little, she just called her brother daddy. Don't worry, this isn't about them. But she has a best friend who, when she was a teenager, they became best friends. And because they were around each other, she would also call him daddy. Which was just weird. Because to me, it wasn't weird that his little sister, who he's basically is her dad, like been raising her since she was only 6 years old, will call him daddy. And I don't know, like I could buy that because they have this close relationship and he does like take care of her. But then to have her friend also call him daddy, for me, it then made it weird that the sister called him daddy, because now it just got weird. And of course, the romance is between the best friend and him. And once she's 18, she really just starts. Now her calling him daddy is like a sexual thing. And so she has a really horrible home life. Her mom is like, you're 18 now, you need to fend for yourself. And so when the sister goes to school, she suggests, well, you should just move into my room and you can stay with daddy and you'll be safer because you're not safe at your home. And he's like, oh, that's going to be a temptation, but also he cares about her, so she moves in. Yeah, this one was novella length, and I don't know why I finished it. I gave it 2.5 stars. And what I really don't know is why I tried the sequel. I was hoping that by trying this sequel, which is called Daddy's Little Angel, that it would make this story make sense, and it didn't. So I DNF'd it after like, I DNF'd it at like 50 pages in because I was like, nope. I like Daddy Kink. This isn't Daddy Kink. This is weirder, and no. Because then, like, what I liked in the first one is him, like, he runs his parents' business, the one that he got given when he was 18, and he's a business dude. And I like a sexy daddy who's like that. But because he was, like, watching teenagers who are, like, going to frat parties, he, like, devolved into being a young guy. And I was like, no, I don't want my daddies to act like this. So I got rid of it. I read Savage Hunger by Lisa Renee Jones. This was one that I got for free on Amazon, and then the Audible upgrade was only like a couple bucks. And man, this one has so many layers, and the story is actually only just getting started. I think there's 4 or 5 parts to this, and it's the same couple, and it's a continuous story. So I'm definitely not done with it yet. It's one that I want to keep reading, but this one is a second chance romance. He is a killer for the government. He's kind of been recruited into that shit. And he was in love with this girl. And then because of reasons, he had to leave. But now he's back because she's engaged to someone she doesn't want to be engaged to because her dad is deployed. And the person she's engaged to is trying to, like, kill her dad. So she found out he was trying to kill her dad before they got engaged, so then she engaged herself to him so she could protect her dad. But then this old love comes back into her life. Sorry, a squirrel just came. A squirrel was just crawling down my deck, and it just scared the bejesus out of me. And so there's a lot in the story that's just getting ramped up. Because in this book, we were just dealing with kind of their past together and him coming back and, like, making a stand for her. And she's like, that's great, but you left me and you're probably a killer and, like, all these things. I give this a 4-star because I'm very intrigued of what it's building to. I am someone who, I like a story that's about the same couple when they're building it up. Like, I can totally be into that. So I'm going to keep reading this series. I just don't know when I will. All right. So then I started my Maggie Cole journey. All right. So here's the story. Full disclosure on everything, right? So I was contacted by one of Maggie Cole's PAs and asked me if I would be interested in getting a copy of some of her books. Now that happens a lot. I mean, not a ton, but that happens a lot. And lately, as you know, it's been happening more with mafia books, okay? So speaking to you authors who might watch me, if you have mafia books you want me to read, I'm here for it. For the last few years, I've still been reached out to by, like, fantasy and sci-fi because that's what I used to read. And now I have to turn those down because I'm like, those videos you're seeing where I talk about fantasy are 2 to 3 years old. I read smutty romance now, so don't come to me with your sci-fi shit that isn't sexy, right? Anyway, but what I noticed is that the books were on, so the third book in this series called The Mafia War is going to be coming out. And so the PA was like, if you want to read the first 2 books, she would send you copies of them to see if you like them for review. And because I don't like to waste people's time, what I said is I was like, well, these books are on KU. Let me give them a try. I'm definitely in a mafia mood right now. Let me give these books a go. And if I like them, of course, you can send me copies and I'll talk about them because I talk about books that I like without any prompting at all. So I downloaded Ruthless Stranger, which was the first one, and I am obsessed. So we'll keep talking about these books as I come upon them. But basically, I read the first one and I immediately was like, I want these. So yes, please send them to me. And also, I want an arc of the third book because I want to read it. And so we're going to talk about some of these. Because also, if you're someone who follows my Instagram, you'll know that I'm going to be doing a Mafia readathon in the first weekend of June. And Maggie Cole is going to be donating some of her books, which was really sweet of her. And I'm very excited for you to start reading some of her books, guys. So this first one is called Ruthless Stranger. It also has one of my favorite cover models, who he's usually on Mafia books. And this one is so many things. Like, guys, this book is so many things. This book is about our hero who, he's 46. He's been in an off again, on again relationship with someone for 11 years. And she won't commit to him. And he's like, I'm done. I'm done with it. One of his brothers is having his bachelor party in Vegas, so he goes there. Then we have our heroine, who she's just got out of a marriage that lasted 20 years. She's 38 years old. She was with him all this time, and he was a soul-sucking leech. So her girlfriends take her to Vegas to have a fun weekend and hopefully get her laid. But when they are trying to set her up with someone, they're like, who do you like? We'll get them for you. She's like, no. I don't want to be a cougar. I don't want to be with any of these young bucks who would be willing to sleep with me. I want someone who's gonna blindfold me, tie me down, and fuck me, and then I don't have to see them tomorrow. That's how I want to break the seal. And it just so happens that Maxim overhears this. And he's like, he's part of organized crime, because this is the Mafia Wars, and he would never want to involve a woman in that. And so he literally makes a deal with her friends who vet him as best as they can. They keep his like wallet and identification and like all this stuff. And they send their friend to this room with her blindfold on, and they fuck all night. And they talk all night. And then he leaves her in the morning. And then the next day they're at a show and he sees her. And he comes up behind her and whispers in her ear, and he's like, one night wasn't enough. Let's do it again. And now she's like, yeah, I want to meet you and know you. And he's like, you still have to be blindfolded because you can't know who I am. It's not safe for you. And they're already like falling so deep. And he's like, if I knew your name, if I like knew who you were, I would not be able to stay away from you. And I can't be with you because it's not safe. But they have another night. And then they go back to their lives. And now his family is trying to get a building built in Chicago. Something I really love about these brothers is they really care about their people who are transplanted in Chicago. They have a lot of Russian immigrants there and people that need work. So as high-powered businessmen and mafia leaders, they care about their people. And so they want them to have work so that they don't have to turn to other means to help them, which I thought was really cool. But who should be on the zoning committee when he goes to a meeting but our heroine? And he's immediately like, well, I'm fucked now. Because I knew if I knew who she was and where she was, that I would not be able to stay away from her. So he pulls her into the bathroom, and they are just, the first thing she says is she's like, she recognized his voice because obviously she didn't see him, and she was like, I missed you. And he's just done. He's just like, oh man. And so he tells her, he's like, well, come to dinner with me tonight and I'm going to tell you who I am. And if you still want to be with me, then we will make it happen. But he's like, you can't back out of that. Because once I have you, I'm not letting you go. And I was like, ooh, boy. So this book was fucking amazing. I love that it was older love. I love that it was both people who'd loved people before. Something you will see in this series as of so far, because spoiler alert, I have 2 more books to talk about. None of these have been sad little shrieking virgins. Everyone's been over the age of 30. And I just love that because I love my mafia. I love my virgin trope. I love my you're the first one for me. I love that stuff. But I don't read about women who like aren't virgins or part of the family in mafia. It just doesn't happen as much because it's very complicated, which makes for a sizzling story. So this was a 5-star read. Then very quickly, I tried to read Hellion, the Hellion Bride. This was a buddy read with Jesson. I knew that this book was going to be tough. I made it through the first 60% and then I kind of skimmed the rest of it. This book just has so much non-consensual stuff. Our heroine is treated so horribly, and it makes our hero look like the biggest douche canoe ever. I'm still going to continue my reread of the series. This book is still gorgeous. I'm still going to show it in Step Back Saturdays because I don't care. But this is, I knew it probably wouldn't hold up to a reread. The first time I read this, I gave it a 5-star back when I was like 15. But it definitely was a 2.5 star this time. And even for that, it is that because the heroine just refuses to be broken. But our hero definitely tries very hard to do so. Then I read Broken Fighter by Maggie Cole, which is book 2 in the Mafia Wars. This one was a friends to lovers or brother's best friend, or whichever way you want to look at it. But this one was amazing because this is the Irish and the Russians. And our heroine, Nora, owns a pub that her grandmother left to her. She's Irish. Her family is the O'Malleys, who are friends with the Ivanov brothers. But her and her love interest, Boris, have been warned away from each other independently by different people. They're like, you can't mix your blood, even though we're friendly with them. He's not good enough for you to marry him. And they're very blinded by that. And so we get to see these two really struggle against that. And for me, that detracted a little bit from it because it was fine for this to be a forbidden romance. But at a certain point, our heroine was just so stubborn about the fact that they couldn't be together that it started to get a little bit like, well, what is Boris supposed to do then? Like, you guys love each other. You're never going to be happy with someone else. Why can't you be together, right? Something else, though, that's cool about the way these stories are told is that so far, I've read 3 of these, and their plots all overlap and intertwine. But the way that she does that, it is so intricately shared, because when you read Ruthless Stranger, you already know that Boris and Nora are together because they're talked about in that book. And so I didn't realize that they were getting a book because now we went back in time a couple of years to see their first interaction with each other, and then these different significant events that happened to the Ivanovs in the first book, we get to see them with Boris and Nora. But the way that it's told is that you're not having to live through the same scenes necessarily over and over again, but what's happening to one brother is definitely important to the other brothers. And so how the stories overlap is very interesting. I did also give this one 5 stars because the sex and the relationship was good. Even though the heroine, she went on one too many times for me, and I was like, girl, move along. Then I DNF'd another book, which I just hated how many DNFs I'm having this week, but I also don't have time when a book isn't working for me. Like, we gotta just move along. And the one was actually one that everyone was very excited that I was reading, so I feel bad. But it was Squall Line by Gwyn McNamee. And this was a Great Lakes Pirates novel. So I was really excited to try this because I actually lived in Duluth for 2.5 years, which is on Lake Superior. And so this was about pirates in the Great Lakes and drug trafficking that happens. And so our heroine is the captain of a cargo ship, and they get boarded by pirates because there are drugs being smuggled on the ship, and they attack the ship to take the drugs. Well, it turns out that the right amount of drugs aren't on the ship, so they end up taking her as a captive. So she ends up being a captive on this ship. And this was, you know, there are reasons why our pirates are being pirates. They're not really the bad guys. They're being forced to what's happening to them. Yada, yada. I've heard it all before. Just great. It's fine. However, I got 65% into this book and they had only kissed each other. And it's only like a 220-page book. And I didn't really feel the chemistry between them. And I didn't really care about the story with the drugs and them needing the right amount of drugs. So I DNF'd it because I was bored. You either got to give me a good story or good sex, guys. Like, that's, I'm a simple girl. I need those things. And this book didn't have those things, so I had to say goodbye. Then I read Texas Splendor by Lorraine Heath. This was one of my TBR picks for May. This is about Austin and Lori. And Austin has just gotten out of prison. He went to jail for 5 years for supposedly killing someone. If you've read the second book, you know what happened there. So this book starts with him being released from prison and going back home and seeing his family. Now, the family members of the man he killed still live in town, and so he keeps being like beaten up and refused work and all these things. The only place he's able to work is for his brother, Dallas, and he doesn't like doing that. He feels that he's mooching off his brother. And so he decides to try to find out how do I explain this? There's some stuff about the guy that he killed that we're trying to find out more information about, if that makes sense. Yes, if that makes sense. So he decides to go on like a road trip to find that. And he ends up running into this woman named Lori and her dog. And her family has all been killed because of reasons. Like being really vague. And her and Austin end up having a night together. And he doesn't want to fall for anyone because the woman that he loved, the woman that he went to prison for, she married his best friend while he was gone, which was a bummer. Which is also a twisty thing because his sister-in-law is his brother's like best friend, or his best friend's sister. So it just makes family gatherings very awkward because when she wants her brother there, it's also his best friend who married his sweetheart. So him and Lori have this night together, and he's not going to be with her, but she's like, that's okay, it's 1:19. Well, surprise baby. But I liked it in here because she didn't lie about it or hide it. As soon as she knew, she told him, and he's like, you know what? I need to take this as my chance as a fresh start. So he does propose marriage pretty instantly. And she's like, no, I don't want to be with you just because. And he's like, you know what? This was an accident. But he's like, I really like you, and I should take this as my fresh start. Will you be my fresh start? And she says yes. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff. So this is technically the wrap-up of the trilogy, but there is a 3.5 that is about some of the younger characters getting an HEA, so I'm definitely going to read that, hopefully in June. But this was 4 stars. I just really love this series. It's pretty low angst for what it's about, and the narrator does a great job. All those books are on Any Play, so I highly recommend you give them a try. I don't read a ton of Westerns, but there's just something about Lorraine Heath, how she does it. Then I read Little Lies by H. Hunting. So this was a new adult, kind of a bully romance. It's the story of the kids from like the Pucked and the All In series by Helena Hunting. And I gave this 3.5 stars. This is about Kodiak and Lavender, and the best parts about it, really, is they both have anxiety. They have different kinds of anxiety, and when they were teenagers, their parents really discouraged them from being around each other for a while because they felt like they were amplifying each other's anxiety and that they were coming too obsessed with each other and being too insular. And so Cody decided to take that as, well, the only way I'll get her to stay away from me is if I'm a bully to her. So he decided to become her bully back then. And now they're in college, at the same college, and something happens to her living area, and now she ends up living with her brother and Cody and one of the other kids of the families because they all live together. And he's like, I'm tired of being mean to you. I'm tired of making you hate me. And I just was not here for it. This is not the kind of bully romance that I like because I'm just not a fan of the ones where like we were best friends and now we're bullies because it's just shit to me. Because it's like, were you ever really someone's friend if you could bully them? And especially because this is a woman that he loves and he's staying away from her for their anxieties. Maybe it's just because I can't get into that, right? Like I don't have that kind of anxiety. So that is coming from a place of just like, they were so frustrating to me. And we had so many flashbacks. Like almost every other chapter was them at age 9 or age 13 or age 11. And I just was like, I don't like storytelling like this to begin with. Plus Kodiak was fucking infuriating for me. It didn't work. A lot of people will have differing opinions about that. They feel like the anxiety rep was very good and it represented them. And so I want to acknowledge that if you struggle with those things, this may be a great book for you. But I just didn't like it, including a bully romance, because it was just very frustrating to me the way that it was told. So this was a 3.5 star. Then I read Anything for This Love by Ashley Jade. This was the finishing of a trilogy, the Wild Hearts trilogy, which I started way back in like 2019, I think, when I read one of the author's books on NetGalley, and I hadn't read anything else by her. I think this was her first book at the time. And it's about this couple who in the first book, they have a summer fling together that ends in a surprise pregnancy. And then before she can tell him, he actually goes on he goes to Africa to do like an internship over there. And he's there for like 18 months. And his mother had lied to the woman and said that he didn't want anything to do with it, tried to pay her off, all those things. Not a story that I generally enjoy, but I was here for it in the second book when he's trying to make amends. And then she has to try to make amends because she didn't ever try to talk to him. She took his mother's word, which is always frustrating in a book when you see someone take someone's word who's not the main characters. But the thing is with this third one, which was called Anything for This Love, the issue that I had was that this book really didn't need to happen. Like, this series could have been a duet because there was no real character growth that happened in this book. There was quite a few little time jumps showing their relationship together. This really was an extended epilogue where we see things happen to their family members and not so much to them. And so it was a very long book of just them being happy, which I love when my characters are happy. I do. But this was too much because there wasn't really a story here, is the thing. It was just them being young parents together, outside forces maybe trying to mess with them, but mostly them just being strong and together. And I was like, what was the point of this book? Like, really? So, I don't know. Maybe I would have felt different if I got to read them all in a row, which you definitely will be able to. This one comes out on the 26th, I believe. But it just wasn't vibing for me, so I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read Cruel Enforcer by Maggie Cole, which is book 3. This comes out June 1st, in time for the Mafia Readathon. This is about Cora, who is the best friend of the heroine from the first book in the Mafia Wars. She's a badass lawyer. This is also an interracial romance between her and Sergei, who is the enforcer for the Ivanovs. And this is also an older woman romance. And so there's lots of joking about cougars in this one, which I liked. He's only 5 years younger than her, but he is also like a silver fox because he's going gray a little bit, which I love that. I do. I have a friend who he's only 31 and he's salt and pepper all over. And I was like, dude, you only gained attractiveness as you've gotten older because you just look delightful. But they meet because of his brother and her friend early on in the first book. And then he is into BDSM and he has a partner that he's been off and on with and she won't commit to him. A little bit the same thing that was happening to Maxime. And we definitely hear them kind of talk about that of like why they let these women use them in this certain way. And then he has an interaction with Cora that is so hot. Whew. So this book has lots of BDSM in it and it's so good. It's mostly just like bondage type with a little bit of like impact play, but it's so sexy. And the thing I love about Cora, I just love about her, is she's that one where she is a badass lawyer bitch. But she herself knows, she's like, I don't want to make decisions when I'm done with work each day. She's like, I make decisions, people rely on me, I do all those things. She's a boss ass bitch. But when the day's done, she wants to come home to a man who will take care of her and sometimes tell her what to do. And like Sergei becomes that perfect man for her. We're still dealing with a lot of the things to do with the Mafia Wars. Obviously this whole series will. And so we run into some issues because for her, she's like, you have to tell me about you. And he's like, I can never tell you all of this. So they definitely are a mafia family that like will not share. Whereas in so many others I've read, like once you're with the guy, you can know everything because you're never going to leave. And these men, all of them, they really like their women to have the option to leave them. And so they try to tell them as little as possible, which does lead to a lot of, you know, friction in the relationship. But this was delicious. I gave it 5 stars. I don't care if I'm a stan. I'm here for it. Then I read Daddy Crush by A. Anders. I gave this 4 stars. There isn't a ton to say about this one. This is a girl, well, a woman who's 25. Her neighbor in like the duplex, he's 43. He has an 18-year-old daughter. So he feels a little bit weird that he's attracted to this girl. This 25-year-old woman, she was raised very religiously, very sheltered, so she's a 25-year-old virgin, and she ends up asking him to teach her things. I gave this 4 stars. It was fun, it was sexy, just light daddy kink. It wasn't a lot, but the thing is that it took so long in the story for them to get to the part of exploring, and then it was just over. So there was some great buildup. It was really sexy, but it could have used another 50 pages. I would have liked seeing them like talk through their dynamic and what they wanted out of it and how it worked, but it was really just kind of like, call me daddy when I'm fucking you. And if we're gonna bring daddy into play, I like it to be talked about. And then the last one I want to talk about, I listened to this book partially at work on Friday and then on my drive up for the wedding, and that was The Rebel King by Kennedy Ryan. So I have read all the books in the King's Men series at this point, but this one picked up with the action. There was a big cliffhanger for the Kingmaker, and this book was great. I absolutely understand why people love this duet. As I've shared, I had to take a break after I read the Kingmaker because it has so many of my like, not like triggers for like emotional wise, but it has all my triggers for like things that piss me off. That book had like all of them. So when I finished it, I was so mad that I was like, I don't want to read The Rebel King and just forget everything that happened in that first book, you know? So I waited about a month. And then when I was going to be driving, I was like, I want to read a book that just is going for it. And so I did. And I absolutely understand why people love this. There was a little too much politics in this book for me. I know that's the point of this series. And it's part of the reason why I don't vibe with this series the same way that I did with the Grip trilogy. But I still love this. Maxim is so alpha and so just like, take care of my boo. And like, she's just so strong and just like, honey, calm down. But she also gets super turned on when he's like that. So it's this dynamic of push and pull, and they spark off each other. And it's so beautiful. Like, they just make me so happy. They just give me all the warm fuzzies. I love it. So I gave this book 5 stars, and I cannot wait for Kennedy Ryan's new release in June. Planning to read it as soon as I can. So yeah. Thank you all so much for watching this. Thank you again to all the new channel members. It means so much to me that you want to support my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe if you appreciate what I do here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.